Hey there guys, Guzman here, back in another video, and today's going to be about how to get the Game Design Merit Badge. Now this one is interesting for me because not only do you make a game, but it's the process at which you make it in. Meaning that scouts who earn the Game Design Merit Badge learn about the aspects of a game and what it takes to efficiently make a game that's interesting for others. And I really like this badge because scouts can earn a merit badge for playing games and for creating their own, which is especially fun during these times of quarantine. I was able to make a game with my family. So, exactly did I do this then? Well, the Central Florida Council, or CFC, is offering online webinars to aid scouts in learning merit badges. These online classes only cost $5 to attend at camploichi.com. And it's really nice because it's accommodating us being confined and helps scouts progress in their scouting career. And so far, I've gotten 4 merit badges from this, so it's really worth it. So another thing with this online setting I thought was pretty cool was after they did the live streams, they actually posted it on the link that they give you whenever you're trying to get on back to the merit badge. So let's see, let's go back to one of the recaps. Let's say session 3. It brings you to a page where you can go and watch the same live stream that they just did, which is really cool. And as it says on the bottom, Boy Scouts of America and the CFC will be offering virtual opportunities to earn badges, including game design. And all you have to do is register for this site called GoToStage, and I'll ask that before you go and try to watch your first thing. But honestly, just use that same email you used to sign up for the class in the first place. It'll all work out, and you can go to play it and watch the live stream. So you can see there's my counselor on the left, and he's going to explain the next objectives, which I think in this one was going to be requirement 5, which is starting the design process. So, moving into game design, it learns the essence of what makes a good game, and you have to apply a lot of terminology, which is the majority of the badge, so just keep that in mind. There's going to be a lot of things you need to know beforehand, because it teaches planning and critical thinking skills. You make your own prototype of the game, including with what you've learned through this merit badge. So, getting right into it, what is a game? Well, there are many types of games, and it can be hard to identify exactly what a game is. However, most games have the following traits, and you can identify what it is with these traits: a form of play, objectives, rules, feedback, conflict, and choices. So, 1A, analyze 4 games you have played, each from a different medium, and I'll explain what a medium is in a second, and identify the medium, player format, objectives, rules, resources, and theme if relevant. A good rule of thumb is to try to make things simple but interesting. A game like Dungeons and Dragons can be so complex if you make it, but a simple game like Twister is simple and fun, and it's easier for people to understand. And that's good to keep in mind for future reference for when you start to go through the process of making your own game. Usually in my merit badges, I'll just move on to the next requirement. I think it's good for me to explain what these are. So just really quickly, I'll do that. So discuss with your counselor play experience, what you enjoy, and what you dislike about it, about the 4 games, and make a chart to compare and contrast these games. So there's categories. What is a medium? A medium is what the player uses to play the game and how they interact to play. For example, a dice games, you use the dice. Card games, you use cards. Video games, you use a system to play it on. Board games, you use a board. Party games, let's say Twister, stuff like that, and a lot more. It's what the players use to play the game, how they interact with the game. And player format, it's the number, arrangement, and alignment of players in a game. So, is it single player? Is it head-to-head? Is it cooperative? Free-for-all? Player versus player, and more. So, how are the players interacting, and, what do the players, how are they organized? What are objectives? They determine whether a player has advanced or won a game, aka scoring, a scoring system, capturing things, solving things, building things, exploring. And remember, game design doesn't just apply to video games. Video games is just one medium according to game design. So keep that in mind. And what are rules? This should be fairly obvious, but an actual good expression is that rules are categorized by the setup, progression of play, and the resolution. What are resources? These are things under the player's control that can be used throughout the game. Kind of like a currency, not always, but that's one example. So you can have pieces to things a currency, like I said before. They have power-ups, like in Mario, special plays, turns, and more. A theme is the setting, story, characters, essentially what the game is about, the backstory. It's not always applicable though. Obviously, for something like tag, there's no theme to it. You're just running around, tagging each other. There's no setting, no story, or anything. But a theme helps players become engaged in the game, makes a game easier to learn, and tells a compelling story. One good example that pops to my head, if you don't know the game, ignore what I'm saying next, but the game Stratego, when I first learned it, it was easy for me to learn because it's like a fantasy thing with dragons and dwarves and stuff like that. But it's a board game, so because of the theme behind it being like fantasy and stuff, it was easier for me to learn as a child because I was a little kid when I learned it. So I'm like, wow, dragons. So anyway, a theme helps with all those 3 points. And 1B, once you know all those things, you describe those 4 games, you move on to 4 types of play value and provide an example of a game built around each concept. Discuss other reasons people play these games. And play value is the reason why a particular game is played. Like, why is it special? Number 2, discuss with the counselor 5 of the following 17 game design terms. Putting 17 terms on these slides would be kind of tedious to do, so I'm just going to read them off this list. First, we start off with thematic game elements like story, setting, and characters. Then gameplay elements with play sequence, level design, and interface design. Game analysis with difficulty, balance, depth, pace, replay value, and age appropriateness. And related terms like single player versus multiplayer, cooperative versus competitive, turn-based versus real-time, strategy versus reflex versus chance, abstract versus thematic. So out of these 17, choose 5 to define. For each term that you pick, describe how it relates to a specific game. 3. Define the term intellectual property. Describe types of intellectual property associated with the game design industry. Describe how intellectual property is protected and why protection is necessary. Now, this is important when you go later on into the game, but basically because of intellectual property and trademark rules and copyright stuff, I had a lot of people during my live webinars, they were asking, can I make Monopoly into my own game? And the short answer is you cannot copy it into you can't just refurbish it and replace all the icons and everything because it's still Monopoly. It's like having a different version of it. So no, you need to create your own game because of like trademark reasons, intellectual property. You need to create your own game. So this will apply later. Give an example of licensed property. Now, 4A, pick a game where the players can change the rules or objectives, like basketball, hearts, chess, kickball. For me, my brother and I chose tag. And briefly summarize the standard rules and objectives and play through the game normally. 4B says propose changes to several rules or objectives and predict how each change will affect gameplay. Play the game with one rule or objective change. Observe how players' actions and emotional experiences are affected by the rule change. For example, one change that I did with my siblings when we played tag, we moved it onto concrete and took out scooters, and you had to tag people with the scooters. Emotional experiences, scooter ankle. Repeat this process with 2 other changes. 4D, explain to your counselor how the changes affected the actions and experience of the players. So essentially, you should have at least 3 changes overall, which means 4 games, 1 normally and 3 with the changes. So 4 games of something that you've changed. And finally, discuss the accuracy of your predictions, like how did the game change. So now with all the terminology and experimenting behind us, we are going into the second half of the badge, which is making a game. But first, there is a design process that comes into play. We incorporate everything you have learned first before, making the game. Remember, this is like a procedural thing. You have to know these different steps in order to make the game. So, 5, design a new game. Any game, medium, or combinations of mediums is acceptable. Record your work in a game design notebook. You don't literally need like a composition notebook or something. I just wrote down stuff on a scratch piece of paper and just wrote down my thoughts. So for notebooks that have to be turned in online, you have two options. One, you can do what I did here, which is to compile it all into one high quality photo so the counselor can zoom in and read it if you have a small notebook. If you have a bigger notebook, however, you can just insert them into a PDF and turn in the PDF of all your saved work. This is a design process. Do not start creating the actual game yet, and I'll explain why in a few slides. So 5A, write a vision statement for your game. Identify the medium, player format, objectives, and theme of the game. All the other terminology we went in the beginning of this badge. If suitable, describe the setting, story, and characters. I'll explain what my game was in a second, but it did not have some of these elements, and that's okay as long as you follow the process and it's easy to understand what's happening. So as I said before, if you're trying to make a game that's like Monopoly, you can't just copy it into a new revamped version of Monopoly. If you have a previous game you made, you can revamp that previous version, but you can't full on copy something and just change a couple things. You have to make your own game and apply changes to your own game. 5B, describe the play value. 5C, make preliminary list of the game rules. 5C also says to define the resources if applicable. 5D says to draw the game elements. So as I said before, as long as you keep things simple and easy to understand, you can have a simple drawing like this as long as you're conveying the message of what your game elements are and your counselor can understand where you're coming from. So for me, I literally just turned this in as my game elements and that counted as good. Once you have all that down, 6A is getting to the prototype game from your requirement 5. Basically, once you have all the details set and you send it off to your counselor, you can demonstrate that you have addressed player safety through the rules and equipment. And, once your counselor has seen everything, he sees that you understand everything, you can record your work in your game design notebook. And now, again, with the second half of the badge, making a game prototype, you have to have your merit badge counselor's approval of your concept before you begin creating the prototype. Requirement 5 was all about designing the game before you start making the game. It's the conceptual parts of it where you need to make sure you understand the procedures, the steps, and like that last slide just said, safety rules and just basic things. And then you get your approval from your counselor before you start creating the prototype. Now you actually start making the game. So you can test your prototype with as many other people as you need to meet the player format based on how you thought players should like how the player should be organized in the game. So this is when you start testing. Compare the play experience to your descriptions from requirement 5B, like how it's supposed to be played. Correct unclear rules, like holes in the rules, possible like loopholes, dead ends, rule exploits, things that the players can say, well, this wasn't specifically stated, so actually, you can fix all that stuff. So 6B also says to change one rule, mechanic, or objective from your first version of the game, and describe why you are making the change. And then 6B also says to play the game again, with recording your game design notebook whether or not your change had an expected effect on how it would change. 6C says to repeat that process we just covered at least 2 more times. So changing a rule, seeing how it went, record your results in your game design notebook. Now 7 is a blind testing. So blind test your game by doing the following. Write an instruction sheet that includes all the information needed to play the game. You don't have to literally write it. It just means you need to have an instruction sheet. Clearly describe how to set up the game, play the game, and end the game. List the game objectives. 7B, share your prototype from requirement 6A with a group of players that has not previously played it or witnessed a play test, so a completely new group. If suitable, describe the setting, story, and characters if you have a theme. Provide them with your instruction sheets and any physical components. Your instruction sheets are provided to them. Watch them play the game, but do not provide them with instruction, because you are only giving them the sheet that you made. And record their feedback in your game design notebook. Now, after that, share your game design notebook with your counselor. In my case, if you're doing the badge online, he'll have you progressively give entries of what you've done, and at the end, any extra entries that you want to share. But if you're doing this in real life, you can give him all your papers, in an organized fashion, preferably, to where they can like discuss the player reactions on your project, and you can discuss what you learned about the game design process. Remember, this badge is all about learning this process of game designing and then making the prototype and working things out using critical thinking. It's kind of like a give or take thing. You can add things, take things away, see what works. Based on your testing, determine what you like most about the game and suggest one or more changes. So this is important for an online situation, but it's always good to take pictures of your progress, whether you're changing a game, changing a rule, or making the game. As long as you have photos of you playing it, your counselor can understand that you followed the correct procedures in order to do it. Now, 8, this is the last requirement, and usually the last requirement is like pick a profession and pick a career, but this actually has a couple options. So, 8A, with your parents' permission and counselor's approval, visit a professional in the game development industry. My counselor, he was actually a game designer where he made prototypes of games, he made simulations, so we were able to talk to him for like half an hour answering questions about things. So once you find the professional, ask about his or her job and how it fits into the overall development process. For some reason, AA also has a side thing saying you can also visit a professional game development of education and discuss the skills he or she emphasizes in a classroom. And if you don't find anyone that's a professional in game design, there's always the other option, which is to list 3 career opportunities in game development. Pick one and find out the education, training, and experience required to work in this profession. Discuss this information with your counselor and explain why this profession interests you. And speaking of interest, I really like this badge because it's interesting to learn about the procedures and all the stuff you have to keep in mind when making something as complex as a game. And I hope this video wasn't as complex, and I hope it was easier for you to understand. If you did like the video, thank you for watching how to get the Game Design Merit Badge. If you enjoyed the video, please like it, turn on notifications on my channel, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye!